Welcome back. You're still tuned in to Salam Media with myself, Salailo Makwidiri. The time is 8:37, and in a bit, we'll be moving on to, I think, a really, really interesting development out in the Middle East, which has unfolded. And that will be, a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, which has come into effect almost after 14 months of deadly conflict. The truce brokered by the United States and France began in the early hours of this morning. And it marks the end of Lebanon's deadliest war in decades, which has claimed over 3,800 lives and has displaced over 1 million people and left both Lebanon and northern Israel in devastation. And what's interesting is under the agreement, Israel will gradually withdraw its troops from southern Lebanon, while Hezbollah will pull back its fighters and weapons south of the Litani River, handing control to Lebanese government forces. But questions remain about the durability of this ceasefire and its broader implications for regional stability, particularly regarding Iran's influence in the ongoing crisis in Gaza, and not even crisis at this point, ongoing confirmed genocide in Gaza. And to help us unpack these developments and their potential impact, we are joined by International Relations Analyst Dr. Gideon Chitanga. Dr. Chitanga, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Salam Media. Always a pleasure having you join us to unpack, I think, some of these very, very fundamental developments, particularly in the Middle East.
Thank you and good morning.
I think the ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hezbollah has been described by many as a fundamental step towards restoring calm. What are your initial thoughts on this development? And the question on everyone's lips is, why couldn't the same be brokered for Gaza and the people of Palestine?
Yes, so that's the question. There must be something very important about why the key protagonists in this conflict and the mediators, the US in particular, but also the role of France in this conflict. I think it gave a turnaround that is fairly quicker compared to Gaza. I think the sense is that Israel felt that the context with the Lebanon conflict would be, at least, I think, more challenging on one end, in the sense that Hezbollah is quite stronger, and its effect in terms of stabilizing the region, I think, is potentially much a bigger threat. Although Israel exerted a lot of pressure and Hezbollah looked weakened, you can see that it continued, I think, after the initial destabilization of the organization. At this stage, it was clear that there's no way that Hezbollah could be defeated in the same way that Hamas could. The threat of committing serious human rights violations and killing a lot more people that Israel has done in Gaza cannot be repeated in Lebanon. There is some form of infrastructure, in the sense of a very weak government in Lebanon, but clearly committed to peace and stability. So, and I think France, it was very clear, if you were following what Macron was saying, it was very clear that there is so much determination, not necessarily in propping the Israeli position or Netanyahu's position, in the same way that the United States is doing in Gaza. The ICC was able to move forward, and I think its position sent a very firm signal, which also resonated, I think, with a lot of European powers, in the sense that there is need for peace, and the killing of people cannot continue under the watchful eye of the international community. Joseph Borrell was very clear that there will be no excuses for Israel this time, not even room to continue to make other requests that would make the whole process longer. So I would say that all the parties, at least in as far as the conflict in between Israel and Hezbollah is concerned, they want peace. Iran wants peace. I think, as Netanyahu explained, it's very evident that fighting a war in multiple fronts is straining the Israel military in so many ways. The Israel economy cannot continue to sustain this war, and there is intense pressure on Netanyahu to at least find an off-ramp. So a number of factors really converged to at least create some conditions that could allow for a kind of an off-ramp out of the conflict. That as it may, it's very early. There's 60 days of withdrawals. There will be other skirmishes, but it looks like this agreement is all the key elements that should allow it to hold, or at least to transform the conflict from intense military violence to continuous dialogue and negotiations that can foster some level of peace, which will also allow these key leaders to then focus on Gaza. I think Biden feels that he needs something to hold on after sitting on a very damaging process on U.S. foreign policy in terms of the American posture and the loss of credibility to the U.S. really as a serious international partner and the number one global power that could be at least trusted by its allies and probably given some sense of a benefit of doubt by opponents to at least create conditions for peace, particularly in the very delicate environment in the Middle East.
And I think you touched, quite extensively on, Joe Biden, the president of the United States. Well, he described this as, and I quote, a permanent cessation of hostilities. How realistic is this goal, given the history of ceasefires between these parties, in recent times?
So this will be permanent to the extent that the underlying factors are resolved. And I think his statement is a window, or suggests a window, to continuously engage the key parties. So there is the role of Iran in this conflict, which backs Hezbollah, which is firmly supported Hamas. And the suggestion that Iran is using these proxies to destabilize or to diffuse or to insulate itself from the potential threats from Israel. But there's also the long-term conflict between Israel and the Palestine. It's a historical conflict. You might recall that many countries agreed that this problem can only be solved through a two-state solution that allows the sovereign being of the Palestinian state and a situation where Israel can exist with both the Palestine and other states as sovereign states. Basically, Israel ceasing its apartheid policies, to use the language that we commonly use in South Africa, and allow Palestine to exist as a sovereign state, independent of Israel. So I think that the war shifted attention to at least ending violence, but it also brought to the fore the underlying issues that have to be resolved. So I guess he is thinking of this off-ramp, which is now can only be seen in temporal terms and on a day-to-day basis, as creating the necessary conditions to further explore finding permanent solutions to end the conflict permanently, to at least ensure that Iran is basically neutralized as a potential threat in the Middle East. But also, I think other than viewing Iran as a potential threat, there's need to understand the security concerns of Iran, deal with what has been traditionally called the idea of the nuclear threat that Iran poses, the idea that it seeks to produce nuclear weapons, to use them as deterrents and to protect itself in a way that could unleash a nuclear race within the Middle East. There's a sense in which the West is very much interested in integrating Israel into the international community within the Middle East by normalizing relations with other countries like Saudi Arabia in a way that allows these countries to at least exist as partners or allies, if not and not threats to Israel. So these conflation of issues, very delicate, become secondary to fighting this war and at least partners seeking solutions to the war. If you remember, before the war, Saudi Arabia was moving very close to at least normalizing relations with Israel in a very proper sense. That was disrupted by this conflict and the significant changes that happened in terms of key parties becoming very polarized. I also think Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and other parties in the Middle East, who are closer to the US, found themselves in a very serious conundrum. How do they continue to align with the US, seek a normalization with Israel, whilst Israel is killing their brothers in Gaza and in Lebanon? So that is a serious conundrum. The second layer is very much about the logistics and infrastructure of maintaining peace between Israel and Lebanon and finding peace in Gaza. And this pertains to both the political and economic financial resources. So the key parties should provide the logistical support in Lebanon, stabilize the government, make sure that Lebanon is a sovereign, stable government that is legitimate, find ways of at least changing relations within Lebanon, where Hezbollah is still a very dominant part of society, not just a military entity that is adversarial to other actors. So all these factors, they have to be settled, and I think they cannot be settled in a day or a week or a month, but there will be a process. And I think Biden was referring to all these factors in the sense of saying this agreement at least provide a basis for peace in the Middle East.
There we go. I think we're going to, on that note, Dr. Gideon Chitanga, International Relations Analyst. Thank you so much for giving us time and unpacking this very, very interesting and very, very important development out in the Middle East for us.
Thank you.
There we go. I think very important, but the question is, with almost parallel negotiations in Gaza remaining deadlocked, could this ceasefire potentially influence those talks? Or, are these, two conflicts which are too distinct in their dynamics that you'd almost, be quite delusional if you were expecting a similar, outcome for Gaza? So, yeah, that's the question we're asking. Do you think, this is making ground fertile for a ceasefire for Gaza? Well, they need it, I think, more than anyone at this point, and it would be quite interesting if we have, a similar outcome to, a parallel negotiation that could come in aid of the people of Gaza, because those negotiations they are still deadlocked, and we hope that this ceasefire could potentially influence those talks. We want to hear from you. Do you believe it's possible, or those two conflicts are too distinct in their dynamics, for us to be expecting a similar outcome? You can engage with us. Our studio line is 0116800355, or you can send us a voice note on 061-766-0355. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, News and Views continues after this.
We are here in the middle of a Zahra neighborhood. The whole neighborhood is already destroyed. More than 17 towers are down. Here, as you can see, the firefighters trying their best to help. The people are still under the rubble. A lot of the people
Join Hamza on his exclusive South African tour as he shares his personal experiences, never-before-seen footage, and powerful insights on the ongoing genocide in Gaza. This is more than just a talk. It's an invitation to witness Gaza through the lens of Hamza Sha'alan. Don't miss this opportunity to meet the photojournalist who brought Gaza's pain and perseverance to the world in its darkest moments. Follow Salam Media on social media pages for more on this tour and be part of